say a bit about myself. Charlie Gallagher, it's not my real name. I can't reveal my real name, so I'll have to lock you all in and make you forget. So I use it to try and be a little bit anonymous. It's an agreement with a day job. When I told them that I had an opportunity to write books, I had a publisher come along. They were very supportive, but they gave me some advice in relation to being anonymous. So hence, that's why I've gone for a pen name. Gallagher is from, I'm a big Oasis fan, and Charlie I was trying to be clever, to be honest. It was a bit of it's a nickname for a Class A drug, so I thought it was very apt. Writing for almost 20 years. I've got some notes if you want to look at down here. The last 5 years or so, I've been writing full-length novels. I wrote 3 and self-published, and I was lucky enough to be picked up by Joffrey Books when the 3rd one was out and about. It was a complete fluke. The editor that I was using at the time was then taken on by Joffrey Books. He got to see my work and then made me an offer. In the last 2 years, I've put out 9 books now. 9 books, and a 10th is with the editor at the moment. And that will come out very shortly. That's a 7-book series, a standalone, and a new series with the first one, which is the book here. In relation to the books, sold nearly 250,000. Mostly they're downloads. The publishers I work with are specialising in sort of digital side of the business, which is the biggest growing side of the business as well. Potentially the future of publishing, if you ask some of the people. Certainly for the type of book that I write, crime thrillers, they really do suit downloads and Kindles and e-readers. And another 250,000 on Kindle Unlimited, so around 500,000 people have read the story. So it's been fantastic for me, and didn't really expect it, to be honest with you. Yeah, the only bits I wanted to say in relation to the most important things, it's not writing advice, like I said, because I wouldn't say arrogant is to give advice, but the 2 things I really concentrate on is to write as often as you can, and to finish. And I know it sounds like a really obvious thing, but it made a real difference to my writing when I was doing the first draft of Bodily Harm, which was my first book. Someone said to me it wasn't finished, and I didn't think it was ever going to be. And it was 4 years down the line. And they said, just finish it, and you never know what happens. And that's the best piece of advice I think I've ever had. Because I did knuckle down. I'd started other things, and we're all good at starting things. I think that's a writer thing. We're brilliant at starting projects. We're not so good at finishing them. But if any of you have got projects going, and it's been going for a little while, and maybe it's hard work finishing a book. It's far harder than starting, because you've got to tie up all those loose ends and get it finished. Because you never know. 2 years ago, when I was first published, or got the opportunity, 500,000 readers since then, 250,000 sold, and all because I finished that first draft. And I owe that person a great deal of thanks. And I always think that now when I start something, I always finish it before I move on. I know it sounds like really obvious advice, but actually it's really good advice. So you take one thing away.
I was just going to say, does your invention ever conflict with the kind of when you're on the job and like when you borrow from real life? Like, is there ever a conflict where you have to be careful of what you're writing? Or?
Yes, absolutely. I'm quite aware that I'd rather not write a manual on how to get away with murder, which is quite possible, because obviously you're talking about investigations, and a lot of most of the investigations are correct as to how they would be investigated, in my experience. So you have to be aware that you are giving away trade secrets. But I have a rule of if you can find it on Google, then I can use it. So there are some tactics that I'm aware of that I've not used. And I'll give an example. There was a scene where someone attacked an ATM and they ripped it out the wall with a digger and then broke it up and got the money out, obviously. And that happens a lot. But there are security measures on an ATM that I'm aware of that I didn't mention for obvious reasons. So yeah, absolutely, there quite often is a conflict. And also, if there's been something, an incident or a crime that I've witnessed or been involved in, investigating or first on scene, I'm desperate to use it, but I can't or won't because it might be in the media, it might be well known locally, and then people would know. It's all fiction, it's all made up, but I do borrow from things I see, but I have to be aware of that sometimes. That makes sense.
You're very careful not to be disrespectful about things that you've seen in time, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the death message example, you do see people at their most vulnerable, and it's not for me to take advantage of that. But we're all writers. We all take from what we see. You know, I've been through some of the worst shifts I've ever had. Have been the best material, and I think that's not a bad way of coping with it, actually, with life in general.
Are you writing as in the first person as a fictional investigator?
No, I write in the third as a, and I use a little bit unusual in that I jump from offenders to, I've got two main characters in the new one, so I kind of jump around a little bit as the point of view moves around, which is difficult because you can lose people. Some people get frustrated with it as a method, but you have to get quite tight control over the stories. But it's my preference because it's a bit more cinematic, in my opinion. In Here's Watching, there's a scene with a young lady who's very badly injured. It's all doom and gloom, and she's lying on the floor, and someone approaches her, and then approaches where she is, and I do the scene from two different points of view, so from hers and the person approaching. So what that allows is the tension building, and the reader gets her version first, and then you get the version of the person approaching who doesn't notice her. You know, so you're able to create that tension, which is what I was trying to do. I'm not saying I've done it successfully, but it seems to be okay. So that's why I use those different points of views and from the third person as well, and try and jump around a bit.
I know you said you draw from experience. Do you find it hard still working in crime and writing?
No, I don't at all. I find it therapeutic sometimes, and if someone upsets me, they tend to be the next day's victim. So that's quite ideal. I've got a description of the next victim. That's you done. But no, I don't. The only it's a little bit difficult with sometimes when I'm at work. I'll give an example of when it gets in the way. We executed a warrant, which is I used to work on a search team, a tactical team, which means we used to kick people's doors in and run through the house as we did. And on this particular occasion, we kicked the door in, ran through the house, and the fella, bless him, was on the toilet. Never a good way to be. At the back of the house, and he was doing what he was doing, and we ran all the way through and forced entry on the toilet, bless him. And me and a mate grabbed hold of him, one arm each side, and it was a bit of a tussle. And the bloke looked at me, my colleague, and said, "This is going in a book, isn't it?" And that's not the time when you're grappling with a big fella on the toilet. So yeah, sometimes it gets in the way. I get teased all the time, as you can imagine, from people at work. I've been called J.K. Rowling more times than I care to remember. Certainly more times than my actual name. But it's great. I love it. So, but no, I don't find it gets in the way. It's therapeutic, and I find it quite easy as well because I've got this, 12 years in the police. When I met up with the other Joffrey authors in London at Christmas, we were talking about sometimes they'll have to research a scene and it will take weeks because they can't get the right person and they have to make appointments or whatever. I don't get that, so I find it quite easy. Any other questions?
Do you ever feel, Charlie, that you have to go to your superiors just to sort of clear an idea you've got that's going to go in the book?
I haven't.
You've got complete sort of freedom.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say they've been very, very supportive from the off. Initially, when I approached and said this is what I was doing, it's not unusual. There's a few police officers that do it. I think you've got Lisa come down, haven't you? Yeah. So no, I've never cleared anything with them. I am very conscious of what might get me in trouble is not the right word, but might bring my employees into disrepute, which wouldn't be ideal. I've always said to them, if you want to read the book before it goes out, you're very welcome. The publisher might disagree, but I've always said that. And to be fair to them, they haven't.
I'm curious about your kind of how you're so prolific. If you were 9 to 5 something, or day job?
Yes, I do at the moment. 8 till 4, Monday to Friday at the moment, which is rare. I've been doing shift work for 10 of the 12 years, 11 of the 12 years, so only the last year it's changed. It's just lucky you don't get many of those jobs in the police, but at the moment I have. And that means I've got a set pattern. I work usually 7 till 9 most nights, and when I can in between. When I was shift work, I used to have a notebook and just all the time really. I would write on the back of a tac team bus when we was on the way to a call if I had at the time. I wrote a lot on the toilet. It's the only time I got left alone. I've got 2 young children. So, you know, when your legs go numb, you know that's when you've done too much. Because I've got 2 very young kids, so you don't get too much time to myself. But you just got to write, you know, as and when you can. And actually, I find sometimes that means you're a little bit more focused. When I do sit down to write, I've got in the habit of being really productive. I can pick up, you know, I don't tend to sit around or get distracted by my phone or by the internet or all the millions of distractions. I seem to be quite productive. So I think it's the way you train yourself.
What about your colleagues? Did they all read your books or?
Some of them do, yes. Yeah, there's a gent who was very much, the main character from the first 7 books was based very much on my skipper at the time. He's read them. But yeah, a lot of them do. They like to try and spot their colleagues as well, because clearly I use a lot of people that I work with. It's all made up, but it's not really. A lot of them are generally based on the real characters. So it's good fun in that sense, because I know that when I'm writing a controversial scene or someone doing something silly, I can use a name similar to the individual I'm pointing at, and then I know I'll get an email or it stops at work a week or so later and they'll have a pop at me, so it's good fun.
Yes, I was going to say, do you have a plan to writing a novel? And do you think your books have changed since you first started?
Oh, they've definitely changed. But in relation to planning, I know there's 2 types of writer, and I'm definitely not a planner. I have a general idea. Sometimes it's the beginning, sometimes it's a main scene that I'm not sure where it's going to sit, and sometimes it's the end. I find if I've got an idea at the end, they tend to be the quickest to write, because I'm sort of working towards something. If I write a start and if I know a start, so I'm writing away from it, they're the hardest. But you can never. I get an idea and then just crack on. But I never know how it's going to end. It's brilliant. So I think I get quite a similar experience to the reader in a sense, because I've got no idea what's going on most of the time. And then obviously towards the end you have to try and tie it up, which can be quite frustrating. I envy planners. You know, if you're writing yourself, you know that you're either a planner or a pantser, and I can't plan books, and I do envy those that sit down to start a book and know exactly where they're going, because I never have a clue. But it works for me, and everyone's different, you know, and you've got to find what works for you, really.
What was the most and the less time you were spending from the beginning to finish up the book, and when did they happen? Like, how far they'd been from each other?
I take 4 months is pretty standard from start to finish.
Wow.
3 months for a first draft. Almost every time it's exactly the same. I don't know why. It just seems to be the way it goes. So I'll do a first draft in 3 months. But the thing about the first draft is that some writers you speak to, they get really bogged down with the first draft. I like to just get it done. It never makes much sense. It's rubbish. It's full of typos, and it needs a lot of work. But once you've got a first draft, you've got something to work with, and there's nothing like it. And I really think that's just the way to do it. Get your first, because the first draft is just you telling yourself the story, and once you've got that story, then you can shape it and make it, you know, what you want it to be. So I'll get to the end of the first draft, and I've changed my mind about. I did it once when I had a main character, and I changed his age halfway through, and I thought I'll go and change it later. So he starts off as a 16-year-old, and he ends as like 50. So I'm halfway through, and I'm like, what am I doing? So it's quite common, but within three months to get a first draft done, and then I'll spend a month.
Wow, that's quick.
Apparently so, yeah. I mean, everyone's different, and that's not right or wrong. You know, if it takes 3 months or 3 years, it really doesn't matter at all. My method of writing stories is to get totally obsessed with the story, and that's just how I can't leave it and come back. But yeah, I mean, when you're at work, you're just sort of carrying on with your job. You've got tasks to do. It's very busy, and then when your shift's done and you sit down, what I find is as I'm going through, I'll need a scene or a person or a character, and I think, oh, I remember that person it might be years ago, you know, that something happened or something I've seen. And then I just put it from there. But I don't generally. It doesn't interfere with my day job, I don't find. Apart from when you're resting somewhere on a toilet and someone reminds you that it might go into a book, but not beyond that.
And the first draft, do you have to change it much or cut it back or alter it from the first draft?
The first draft generally is the story what won't change. But for example, if I'm writing about someone and it's based on someone I know, I'll use their name in the first draft, because then it doesn't break my
Then you can
momentum. Exactly. Because if you think names are a nightmare, I've got a book of baby names, and every time someone comes around, they're like, oh, you know, another one coming. It's like, no, I just. So names are a nightmare because they stop you dead. You think, right, I need this character. He's a 50. What should I call him? And it's a nightmare. So I just use their name. And what I find is by the end of the first draft, the story won't change at all, generally, but characters' names will change. Some locations will change.
Pretty much an effort to hide that controversial scene from reality. Or is it easy or not that difficult?
Generally, if I'm writing a scene and I recognise that it's very close to, then it will change, and I won't do it. So I won't finish the scene, or I won't include it, if that makes sense. So where there's something that's been in the media locally, and would fit, it would make potentially a good scene, I just won't do it, and I'll come up with a different way of expressing what I'm trying to do. So yeah, it can be a frustration. It doesn't happen often, I must say. And obviously, if I'm writing now, I mean, the book I'm writing now, it will be out much later in the year, so I don't have to be quite so conscious.
So when you actually like do your bit of writing, is there like a set amount that you do? I know, like Lisa, hers are like really short chapters.
Yeah.
So every time she sits down and writes, she just writes a chapter.
Right. No, personally, I know I speak with a lot of writers that have a 2,000 words a day. They stick to it rigidly. I can't work like that personally. I write until I get to a point where I finished a scene. That might not be the end of a chapter, but it's generally a scene. Sometimes I do 5,000 words, sometimes 700. But those 700 will be far more important because I've got a difficult scene finished, or I've set up the next, or something like that. So I don't get hung up on a word count, and I think that's, again, I found that good advice. When people sit down and say, right, I need to do 2,000 words a day, then there's pressure to do 2,000 words, and you might end up scrubbing 1,500 of them. So no, I don't personally. I just sit down and get to the point where I finished, or I feel tired and my writing started to get crap, and then I'll stop.
Crime seems to be the in thing at the moment, doesn't it? In the book world.
Yes, it's the biggest genre, biggest selling genre, and growing all the time. There's an awful lot of crime books. It's difficult to stand out. I think you have to have a USP. I'm not sure what mine is, to be honest. I guess the police officer background helps. But yeah, people are interested in police work. I've really noticed that since obviously wearing the uniform. People generally are interested. And I think with things like serial killers, which are really popular, it can be anyone. Anyone can get caught up in it, and I think people find that interesting. So yeah, it's a big genre, but it's good fun. I like writing about. I like writing bad characters. Actually, I think that's quite common for police officers. They like to write, the other side, if you like.
What made you start writing?
I don't know. I don't really know where anyone starts. I know I was 18 when I started my first full-length novel, so that's 20 odd years ago. I think you just know. You can't. I think that once someone said to me once, you're a writer when you can't stop, and I think that's that's kind of where I am really. If I wasn't, I've written 3 books that got nowhere as self-published. Self-publishing is really difficult. It's really, really fantastic and really rewarding, but it's really difficult. It's really hard work, and you've got to have a lot more skills than just being able to write a good story. And I don't have those skills, hence the titles and the covers. So yeah, it is really difficult.
You've always been a writer, haven't you? And just it's not something you choose to do. It's just you stop your day job, and then ideas pop into your head, and you write them down, and it's just something you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite healthy as well. I think, I talk about the job, but we all have difficult times, and I think sometimes writing about them, certainly if someone upsets you, if you write them as a victim, that really helps. I must say that makes you feel a lot better. But if you have difficult times, and we all do, getting it down on paper as a scene, or just writing about how it makes you feel, it's really helpful, and you learn a lot about yourself as well.
You said at the very beginning that you write about what you know.
Yes.
That's one of the
the
pieces of advice every writer gets from all the greats. They say the same thing.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider, I mean obviously while you're doing this job, perhaps not, but would you ever consider doing something, writing about something different?
Yeah, absolutely I would. The standalone was a little bit different. I did one called Ruthless, not my title, which I'm probably most proudest of actually. I think it's my personal favourite because it's not such a crime related. It's not from the point of view of the police, it's from a point of view of a young victim. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to try something completely different at some point. I'm not sure what that is yet.
One thing I don't like about crime writing, and it's shown on things like Coronation Street and these things, is that they portray the police in such a bad light.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely.
And that really gets, there's a Scottish writer again who portrays the police as sort of bumbling idiots. And I think that's why I don't read a lot of crime. How do you
I have a nemesis, and I can't name him. He's an author, very successful, started self-published, very good at marketing, terrible at writing police officers, has no idea. And I think his research is, he just hasn't researched. And it's really frustrating when police officers are portrayed as being very wooden and dealing with black and white scenarios, because policing is all about the grey, and there is no black and white. And especially when it comes to offenders. I always say this, and it's a little bit controversial, but every single person has the capability of being an offender, committing a crime, whether that be the worst, murder, you know, because they can be crimes of passion. We've all got that point, and I think you have to have an understanding of people before you start writing about them. But similarly, from a police point of view, we've all got different motivations for being a police officer. Some of the best people I know are police officers. I have to say that because, you know, they're very close friends of mine. Yeah, well, yeah, of course you would, yeah, with your husband. But yeah, police are generally, it's a really easy way of appealing to a lot of people. A lot of people don't like the police. The media, they've never written a positive article about the police in their lives. And because it sells papers, you know, so they're just feeding into that. And I think writers that aren't police officers, certainly, you know, that's an easy sell as well. They can portray the police as being bumbling idiots, and some people like to read about that. But I totally agree, and in relation to my books, I try and show the police clearly in a different light. But I've written about corrupt officers for drama purposes. I've never met one, and I can say that honestly. I've never seen a single bit of corruption in my 12 years. I've been involved in loads, obviously, myself. But no, I've never seen it at all. But I write about it because it's good drama.
But what is shown in your books is the officers that go out and deal with the job, and then they go home and they have the actual human emotion that comes from dealing with those things, which you don't often see in other books, don't you?
Really good, yeah, absolutely right. Really good point. That often police officers, it's really easy to show a dramatic scene of a car accident, of a murder scene, for example, but they never follow the police characters after that, and I know what it's like to turn up at something and how it affects you. You know, you've got to go home to your kids and switch off from what you've seen. It's not possible. It just doesn't happen. So you have to have your ways of coping. It affects you and your family. And I quite enjoy showing that.